welcome to City Awakening Church. We're so glad that you're here. My name is Zach. I'm the executive pastor. And I just want to welcome you, especially if you're a first-time guest today. We're honored for you to be with us. We're starting a new teaching series today called Starting Point, where we're going to be exploring some of the important but often challenging questions of our Christian faith. So over the next 6 weeks, we hope that you'll come back each week. And then we especially want to encourage you to get plugged into one of our online small groups during this time, because those are going to be vitally important to have follow-up conversation to each Sunday's teaching topic. So at the end of the service today, we're going to give you an easy next step for getting plugged into one of those groups. We hope that you enjoy the service. Let's worship together.
Stories of what they think you're like, and I've heard the tender whisper of love in the dead of night, and you tell me that you're pleased and that I'm never alone. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are, it's who you are, it's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am, it's who I am, it's who I am. I've seen many searching for answers, far and wide, but I know that we're all searching for answers. Only you provide, 'cause you know just what we say before we say a word. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are, it's who you are, it's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am, it's who I am, it's who I am. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. You are perfect. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. Love so undeniable, I can hardly speak. Peace so unexplainable, I can hardly think as you call me. Deeper still as you call me. Deeper still as you call me. Deeper still into love. Love, love, you're a good, good Father. It's who you are, it's who you are, it's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am, it's who I am, it's who I am. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are, it's who you are, it's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am, it's who I am, it's who I am. God of creation, there at the start, before the beginning of time. With no no point of reference. He spoke to the dark and fleshed out the wonder of life. And as you speak, 100 billion galaxies are born. In the vapor of your breath, the planets form. If the stars were made to worship, so will I can see your heart and everything you made. Every burning star, a signal fire of grace. Creation sings your praises, so will I. Of your promise, you don't speak in vain, your syllable empty or void. For once you have spoken, of nature and science follow the sound of your voice. And as you speak, 100 billion creatures catch your breath, evolving in pursuit of what you said. If it all reveals your nature, so will I can see your heart and everything you say. Every painted sky, a canvas of your grace. If creation still obeys you, so will I. So will I. If the stars were made to worship, so will I. If the mountains bow in reverence, so will I. If the oceans roar your greatness, so will I. For if everything exists to lift you high, so will I. If the wind goes where you send it, so will I. If the rocks cry out in silence, so will I. If the sum of all our praises still falls shine, then we'll sing again 100 billion times. Oh, oh, oh. God of salvation, you chased down my heart through all of my failure and pride. On a hill you created, the light of the world, abandoned in darkness to die. And as you speak, 100 billion failures disappear. Where you lost your life so I could find it here. If you left the grave behind you, so will I can see your heart and everything you've done. Every part designed in a work of art called love. If you gladly chose surrender, so will I can see your heart 8 billion different ways. Every precious one, a child you died to save. If you gave your life to love them, so will I you would again 100 billion times. But what measure could exist to your desire? You're the one who never leaves the one behind. So will I.
Hey everybody, my name is Lewis. I'm the lead teaching pastor at City Awakening Church. Great to be with you, great to gather with you through our online worshiping community. Before we get into today's message, I just want to say special thanks to those of you who've been praying and providing meals for my family. Over the past couple of weeks, my wife and daughter have been pretty sick. They've had to be isolated in our bedroom, and we believe that they're on a road to recovery at this point. But just wanted to say thanks for all the support. You know, it's meant a lot to me. It's meant a lot to my family as well. I also want to say it's been a great joy to hear about all the different ways that people in our church are bringing joy to people in our city. I mean, for example, the past couple weeks, we had somebody actually write 100 letters of hope and encouragement, along with some bags of some luminaries to be able to give to 100 of their neighbors leading up to Easter. We had several families who also got together. They got permission to go to a nursing home, a local nursing home in town, and they basically went up to the windows of the nursing home and had a sign saying, "Would you like us to decorate the outside of your window?" And they did. They decorated the outside of the people's window, even gave them bird feeders and things like that. Brought a lot of joy to the residents in that nursing home. One of the ladies at the nursing home even said that this place was boring until you all came. So we had people doing that. We also have had people recording songs of encouragement on social media and sharing it just to uplift people's spirits during this pandemic that we're in. This is the type of thing that the church should always be doing. A church should always be caring for each other and then bringing joy to the people in our city like Jesus has done for us. And so let's keep doing that, City Awakening. Okay, just brought a lot of joy to my own heart to hear how our church is doing these things, both in our city and even in other places. Now, as for today we are starting a 6-week teaching series that we're calling Starting Point. All right, it's called Starting Point. It's about reasons for faith, not skepticism. We want City Awakening to be a place where both skeptics and believers can seek truth and find joy in loving community together. Starting Point is an opportunity for the skeptic to take some steps towards faith, maybe explore some steps towards faith, but it's also an opportunity for the believer to have their faith strengthened, to have a deeper understanding of the faith that they have. And so this is a series that's for both the skeptic and for the believer. We're going to be addressing different questions like, does God exist? Should you trust the Bible? Why should we trust the Bible? What about, why would God allow suffering and evil to exist? That's one a lot of people have in their minds. Christians or skeptics are like, why would God allow suffering and evil to exist? We're going to address all these questions and more throughout the next 6 weeks in this series, giving you reasons for faith, not skepticism. And today we're going to talk about in particular is the existence of God. We're going to address the question, does God exist? All right, so if you have your Bibles, go ahead and turn them over to Genesis chapter 1, very first book of the Bible. We'll start off in Genesis chapter 1, and then we'll actually go to Romans chapter 1, verses 18 to 20 as well, or 25 as well. So we'll head to both places. But Genesis chapter 1 for right now. Title of today's message is, Does God Exist? And here's the big idea. Our world is full of fingerprints of God's existence. All right, that's the big idea. Our world is full of fingerprints of God's existence. Now, let me give you a little bit of context. Here's your context. It's really short. Your context is this. It's God. All right, that's it. That's your context. It's God. See, the book of Genesis is the very first book of the Bible, and it starts off with God. It starts off with God, starting creation, setting everything in motion, setting life in motion, setting creation in motion. It's a book about how God created everything, but also established his covenant love with his creation. And so the book of Genesis starts off with God. All right, let's check it out. Here we go. Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 says this, "In the beginning, God." Now, this is the very first words in the Bible. It's in the beginning, God. And the implication there is that God existed before creation. Right, God existed before creation. God is the one who set creation in motion. He's the one who started life and everything that we can think of both in our world and our universe. God is the one who set it all in motion. God was the one who started all of that. And this is where a skeptic might disagree. Not all skeptics, but a lot of skeptics might disagree with this one. You have a believer who says that everything started with God, but a lot of skeptics will say, well, no, we don't believe that it did. And here's the thing that we need to acknowledge right in the beginning of this, right? We need to acknowledge that both of those positions, both of those claims require a certain amount of faith. It requires faith for the believer to think that everything started with God, and it also requires faith for the skeptic to believe that it didn't start with God, because neither the believer or the skeptic were there in the beginning to see it all happen. And so there's a certain amount of faith that's required for us to believe in both claims. And so you can neither prove nor disapprove the existence of God. But what we can do is we can look at the evidences that our world has presented us with and then make a faith-based decision to believe or to not believe. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to give you what I'm calling four fingerprints of God. All right, there are four fingerprints of God. What I would say are four reasons that we can believe in the existence of God. Okay, four credible reasons. So we'll call it the four fingerprints of God. And this is the first fingerprint. It's number one, the cosmological fingerprint. All right, that's the first fingerprint. It's the cosmological fingerprint. And here's what that basically is about. It's that if you look at our world, how our world functions and how it operates, it always has a cause and effect. All right, everything in our world has a cause and then it has an effect. All right, meaning something sets it in motion, right? You have your cause and then that leads to an effect from that cause. I mean, an example of that would be is if I were to take a soccer ball, if I were to put it on the ground, soccer ball is not going to move itself. Right? How's it going to move? What's going to make it move? Somebody is going to have to come along and is going to have to move that soccer ball for it to actually move. Soccer ball is not going to move itself. Well, in Genesis chapter 1, when it says that in the beginning, God, right, what it's saying is that God existed before all of creation. He's the one who caused the first cause, right? He's the one who created the first cause. He's the one who set it in motion. He's the one who set all of life as we know it in our world and in our universe. He's the one who set it in motion. Now, there's some strong evidence out there for, just the universe having started by a big bang, everything kind of moving outward from a very small point, a very, very tiny point, and everything just exploded and it's moving kind of outward, right? There's some strong evidence for that. And in fact, there's a very well-known scientist by the name of Francis Collins. He says this. He says, we have this very solid conclusion that the universe had an origin, the Big Bang. That implies there was nothing before that. I can't imagine how nature, in this case the universe, could have created itself. And the very fact that the universe has a beginning implies someone was able to begin it. See, what Collins is saying there is that he says that he believes that the universe started with the Big Bang. He believes in the Big Bang. But he says that there had to be something that caused, there's your cause and effect, right? Something that caused the Big Bang to happen to begin with. There had to be someone that started this everything that we know in motion, had to set it all in motion. See, the cosmological fingerprint forces us to ask this question: which is the better explanation for the origins of our universe? What's the better explanation? Is it that the universe can create itself out of nothing, or that there was God? That God was there in the beginning, setting it all in motion? Which do you think requires more faith to believe in? That the universe can simply create itself out of nothing, or in the beginning there was God, like Genesis 1 says? See, that's the question that the cosmological fingerprint, the cause and effect, forces us to have to ask. Which do we think requires more faith to believe in? There's another thing, a second fingerprint that I think we could talk about here, and it's number 2, the fine-tuned fingerprint. It's the fine-tuned fingerprint. See, this is what the fine-tuned fingerprint is about. It's that our world has been so perfectly designed, so perfectly calibrated and put together, that there must have been an intelligent designer involved in it. I mean, if you really look at the fine details of what it takes for life to exist in our universe, then you see that if we made the slightest shift in gravity, or even the slightest shift in the rate of the universe's expansion, then none of life would exist. And so there's a statistical probability that is so big for the existence of life to happen. It's so unique and so unlikely. A massive statistical probability on this that an astronomer by the name of Fred Hoyle, he states this. He says, the probability of life arising on Earth by purely natural means without special divine aid is less than the probability that a flight-worthy Boeing 747 could be assembled by a hurricane roaring through a junkyard. He says that in other words, if the probability of life being able to create itself on its own without divine intervention, without God's hand being involved in it, without an intelligent designer, he says it's more probable for a 747 to be able to put itself together and be flight worthy and having a hurricane do that in a junk, swirling it all together and all the parts and all the nuts and all the bolts and everything can put it together by itself. He says that's the probability. What he's basically saying in that is he's saying that our world has been so perfectly calibrated for life that it would be statistically negligent for us to believe that all of that happened on its own by chance. In fact, Stephen Hawking, another famous scientist, he says this. He says, the odds against a universe like ours emerging out of something like the Big Bang are enormous. It would be very difficult to explain why the universe would have begun in just this way, except as the act of a God who intended to create beings like us. See, statistical probability for the origins of life has created such an issue for skeptics that they've actually had to create another theory. And it's called the multiverse theory. It's not even a theory that is really backed by science at this point or anything like that. But it's just a theory at this point. But a lot of people try to believe in this multiverse theory. And what a multiverse theory is basically that there's multiverses. There's multiple universes, an infinite amount of universes. Kind of think like Star Wars or Marvel movies and things like that. Multiple, infinite number of universes. And we just happen to be on the one in our universe that was perfectly designed enough for us to be able to have life exist. In fact, this is a position, a theory that atheist scientist Richard Dawkins is highly a fan of. He's a proponent of this theory. And in his book, The God Delusion, he actually admits that the statistical probability for the origins of life, he says, is staggeringly low. And so Dawkins, how did it happen then? How did the origins of life take place? How did all this come to be? And this is his response. It was luck. That's his response. It all happened, the origins of life happened by pure luck. That's his response to it. So really, statistical probability only gives us two options when it comes to the explanation or the reason for the origins of life, how it all happened. And it's either an intelligent designer or pure luck. All right, which do you think is the better explanation, the more reasonable, logical explanation? Which do you believe it requires more faith to believe in? That this entire universe and the origins of life were created by an intelligent designer, or it all happened by luck? The universe created itself by, I think the cosmological and the fine-tuned fingerprints, I think those are the more reasonable explanations for how all of this came to be. It was because there was an intelligent designer who was there in the beginning. Genesis 1 says, in the beginning was God. But now we're going to go to Romans chapter 1, verses 18 to 25. And what we're going to see is that, even though, these fingerprints, it might be a higher statistical probability for us to believe in the existence of God and all that. We have these fingerprints and all that, all that. Even though these are there and you can present these facts to be, there are still some people who will not believe. They refuse to believe. They want to suppress the truth about God's existence. All right, that's what Romans 1 is going to show. So Genesis 1, in the beginning was God. We got the cosmological fingerprint, the fine-tuned fingerprint, but what we're going to see in Romans 1 is that even when these fingerprints are presented to people, there's still some people in the world who refuse to accept it, to refuse to believe in God. Romans 1 says that. So let's go ahead and turn there. In Romans chapter 1, verses 18 to 25 says this. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. Well, why would somebody want to suppress the truth? Why would somebody not want to know the truth about God? I think there's many reasons why people might want to suppress the truth. Maybe some of you listening right now, there might be some reasons. Some of these reasons may fit with you. You know, some people, they want to suppress the truth because they don't want God telling them what to do. You know, they don't want God or anybody else telling them what to do. And, you know, if they believe in God, then God's going to tell them they can do this or they can't do this. And so, you know, they want to suppress the truth. They don't want to believe in God because they're worried about God controlling their life and telling them what to do. For some people, it's about intellectual pride. You know, they have an intellectual pride and intellectual arrogance about them, and they cannot admit that they are wrong about certain things they believe, maybe believing in the existence of God or other beliefs. And so some people will try to suppress the truth in life in general because of that intellectual pride. But most people I tend to encounter and engage with and talk with, you know, about these kind of things is most people I find out the reason they might suppress the truth when it comes to God is because of pain. It's because of pain or past hurts that they've been through in life. You know, they can't understand why God, if God does exist, then why would he cause them to go through some of the pains and the hardships that they've been through or that they've seen other people go through. And so they suppress the truth for that. In fact, I was having lunch with an atheist, a while back, and, you know, we were just having a good conversation, a good lunch together. You know, he was talking about atheism and I was talking about faith. And, you know, like I said, we want to be a place for both skeptics and believers. And so, you know, we were just having a good conversation together, exploring truth together. And I remember in the middle of our lunch, I had said to him, I said, you know what? You're not an atheist. Because I don't believe you're an atheist, because I know an atheist when I see one, because I used to be an atheist. And I don't believe that you're an atheist. In fact, I believe that you know God exists intellectually. You just don't want to know God personally. Why is that? And here's what he said. He said, you know what? You're right. You're absolutely right. He says, I've thought about this a lot. He goes, and I believe intellectually, I believe God exists, and I believe that God is Jesus. He says, but I don't want to know God because God allowed my baby to die. He allowed my child to die. And I don't want to know a God who allows that. And so at that point, I looked right at him and I put my hand on his shoulder and I said, oh man, listen, you're not an atheist. You're grieving. You're grieving. And so let's talk about your grief. See, I think like this man, this is the way a lot of people tend to think when they suppress the truth about God. Even some believers wrestle with this. You know, it's why would God allow suffering and evil to exist? And because some people can't understand that, they choose to suppress the truth about God and even God's existence. We're actually going to address that question in a couple weeks, you know, why God allows suffering and evil to exist. And so don't miss it, okay? Stick around. But for now, I just want you to realize that there's many different reasons why people would suppress the truth about the existence of God. Verse 19, for what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world, in the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. All right, so here we see both the cosmological and the fine-tuned fingerprints in the text. You know, and the text actually says that humanity is without an excuse. We're without an excuse for disbelieving in the existence of God, because God's fingerprints are all over his creation, are all over the things that he has made, the text says. You know, God's fingerprints are all over. We can see God's fingerprints in every tree and every leaf and every melodic tune that we hear a bird sing. His fingerprints can be seen in every waterfall and every beautiful sunset and every swirl of the northern lights, like a painter's stroke. You know, the entire world and creation is screaming that there is an artistic creator that created it all. Even the fact that we have a moral law that is written in the hearts of every human being is screaming at us the existence of a creator. In fact, that's the third fingerprint that I want you to hear about. Number three, the moral law fingerprint. It's the moral law fingerprint. Now, what the moral law fingerprint is about how, deep in every human heart, there is a moral law, a moral code, a moral compass that tells us, this is right and this is wrong. This is moral and this is immoral. That moral law, that moral code has been in the heart of every human being and every human culture throughout human history. Right? It's this sense inside of us that we have that, this is right, this is wrong, this is moral, this is immoral, this is just, this is unjust. Why is that there? Why is that there, and where does it even come from? See, in today's society, society wants to teach us about moral relativism. Now for those of you who are listening that might be a part of a younger generation, this is a big thing with, younger generation, especially millennial population and even younger. And, not all millennials, not all younger generation believe this, but a lot of them do. And so I want you to really pay attention to this because a lot of people accept moral relativism in our society as a whole. And our society is trying to teach us that, morality is all relative, meaning it's up to the individual. Nobody can tell you what is moral and immoral, what's right and what's wrong, because that's for you to decide. It's for the individual to decide. So you get to decide what's moral, what's immoral, what's right, what's not right, what's wrong, right? And so you get to decide. But here's the problem with moral relativity, with people who believe in moral relativism. Right? It's that they only believe in moral relativity. They only believe it when it's relative to their own morality. Meaning as soon as somebody does something that's wrong against them, then all of a sudden, that morality isn't relative anymore, because you believe you're right and they're wrong. So let me give you an example of that, right? I think everybody who's watching this, most of us, if not all of us, should believe this, right? See, there was a moral standard I just gave you, okay? Not moral relativity. But here's the thing, right? I think we would all most likely agree that child abuse is wrong, or what the Nazis did to the Jews in the Holocaust, exterminating the Jews, was wrong. I think most of us, if not all of us watching this, would agree that that is wrong. But if you believe in moral relativism, then you can't say it's wrong. You can't say that's wrong because to the child abuser, that's right. To the Nazi who is trying to kill the Jews and exterminate Jews, they believe that that's right. They believe that that's okay. And so who are you to tell them that that's wrong? If you believe in moral relativism, they could just come back and say to you, no, wait a minute, morality is relative. All right, you seeing the problem with this here? Right, the problem is that with moral relativity, it does not give you the right or anybody the right to say this is right and this is wrong. It doesn't give you the right even when it comes to a child abuser or a Nazi who is trying to exterminate the Jews. This is part of the issue with moral relativity. All right, now there's actually a Yale law professor by the name of Arthur Leff, and Leff states this. He says, in the absence of God, who among us ought to be able to declare a law that should be obeyed? Either God exists or he doesn't. But if he doesn't, nobody can take his place. See, this Yale law professor, his point is he's basically saying that, if God doesn't exist, then who gets to decide what's lawful and what's unlawful? Who gets to decide what's right and what's wrong? Who gets to decide what is considered to be moral and what's considered to be immoral? Oh, well, we should just let society vote on it, let the people vote on it. No, because we see where that goes as well. I mean, even that can create problems in and of itself. Whenever the majority always has the right and the power to be able to vote, we've seen throughout history that it can lead to oppression. It could lead to oppression of the minority. It could lead to things like slavery or genocide or hostility towards certain people. The majority decision doesn't always equal the right decision. Doesn't always mean the right decision. Sometimes the majority decision can actually be the wrong decision. Morality or the majority decision doesn't equate to a moral decision. Right? So there could be an issue with that as well. All right? Now, so then who gets to decide what's right? See, if you believe in human rights and if you believe in morality, then the better explanation, the thing that makes more sense, is to believe that there is an existence of God, that God exists, and that God is the one who can have the better standard for morality than anybody in humanity ever could. The alternative to that is to believe that there is no God, all morality is relative, giving nobody the right to determine what is right and what is wrong, giving nobody the right to create a standard of morality to impose it on other people. And if you had to make the decision, if you had to choose between which type of society you would rather live in, you would choose to live in a society that has moral standards over one that has moral relativity. Why? It's because deep inside your heart is this desire to have a moral standard, a moral law. And you know that having a moral standard is a far better way to live than to live with moral relativity. If we lived with moral relativity, It would be disastrous to our society and disastrous to our world. And so the question that the skeptic has to wrestle with is, where does that desire for a moral standard come from? And who is it that gets to decide what that moral standard is? That's the issue that the skeptic has to wrestle with. The text continues in verse 21. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him. But they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools, and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. Therefore God gave them up in the lusts of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie, and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. See, there's the problem that's in all of humanity, all right? There's the issue that we all start out with, and it's sin. It's that we would rather worship the created rather than the Creator. We would rather pursue things in this world than pursue the very God who created this world. And this leads us to the fourth fingerprint, and it is, number 4, the eternal thirst fingerprint. It's the eternal thirst fingerprint. The eternal thirst is similar to the moral law. Just like every human heart, every human being has a moral law, a moral compass that's written in their heart. Well, every human heart also has this desire, this eternal thirst in us for joy, for satisfaction, for contentment in our lives. Every human heart and every human being has that. We want to pursue joy. We want to hold on to joy. We want to pursue things like pleasure and satisfaction with our life. And we try to find it in other things and created things in this world, but the created things in this world never seem to satisfy our thirsty hearts. And so what happens? Let's say you worship money, right? If you worship money, you're always going to want more. If you worship success, you're always going to want more. If you worship the approval of others, you're always going to want more. Right? It never stops. It's always more, more, more. And it's because the things in this world, they may be able to provide you with some satisfaction in the moment, some pleasure in the moment, joy in the moment, but it's always going to turn out to be the same in the end. In the end, it's going to leave you coming back for more and thirsting for more again, because there is this eternal thirst for joy in your heart that nothing in this created world is ever able to satisfy. Why? Again, we have to ask that question, why? Why is that in the heart of why is there an eternal thirst for joy and satisfaction and pleasure in the heart of every human being? Why is there even pleasure to begin with? Have you ever thought about that? Like, why is there even pleasure to begin with? Think about it, right? If you just eat your food, we could just eat our food, but we don't, right? We don't just eat our food. We have taste buds that allow us to enjoy our food, that give us pleasure and delight in eating our food. Why? Why is that even there? Why is there even pleasure to begin with? King Solomon says that it's because God has placed eternity in the hearts of humanity. He says God's placed eternity in the hearts of humanity, meaning the pleasures that we have in this creation are gifts from God that are supposed to point us to God. Right? We're not supposed to be worshiping created things. They're not designed to do that. Instead, they're to point us to the God who has given us those created things as gifts. The pleasurable aromatic smell that you have from food being cooked is never meant to satisfy your hunger. It's meant to draw you to the food that can satisfy your hunger. Well, the pleasurable aromas that we have in creation aren't meant to satisfy us. They are meant to point us to the Creator God who can satisfy us, who can eternally satisfy us. See, created things were never designed to eternally satisfy us. They were instead meant to point us to the God, the Creator, who actually can eternally satisfy us. I love the way C.S. Lewis puts it. C.S. Lewis said, most people, if they really look in their hearts, would know they want something that can't be had in this world. There's all sorts of things in this world offering to give it to you, but they never keep their promise. If I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is I was made for another world. He says the most probable explanation is I was made for another world. What's the alternative explanation? It's that there is no God, that God does not exist, that you're an accident, your life is an accident that just happened by luck, and that you have absolutely no eternal purpose whatsoever. That's the alternate explanation. And so, you might as well enjoy life while you can, enjoy the moment while you can, because it's all coming to an end, and eventually it's just not going to be there anymore. That's the alternate explanation. Deep down inside, in your heart, in your soul, whatever you want to call it, you know that doesn't sit right with you. Something that just doesn't feel right about that. You think to yourself, no, it can't be that, right? That can't be all there is to this world. That can't be the purpose of this world. There's got to be more to this life than this. There's got to be more to life than just simply luck. There's got to be more to life than us simply being teased by pleasures in this world that are just going to simply be stripped away from us in the end. There's got to be more to life than this. Deep inside your heart and my heart, humanity's heart, is this desire for your life to have meaning, for your life to have purpose, for the joys that you have in life to continue on. It's why we mourn so deeply at a funeral. It's because we want the joys of life with that person to continue on. Deep inside our hearts, we have a desire for our lives to have purpose and for the joys of life to continue. Christianity not only affirms that desire, but it also gives you a solution for that desire. It gives you the solution that you can have eternal purposes and eternal joy in Jesus Christ. See, the Christian message teaches that, yes, in the beginning there was God, and God created everything, set it in motion. But then we sinned as God's creatures by worshiping creation rather than worshiping our Creator. Well, Jesus comes, He enters into our creation as our God, fully human, fully divine, enters into our creation to restore harmony back to our relationship with God, our relationship with each other. He enters into creation to kind of begin a new process, a new effect of restoring our world as we know it. Jesus enters into His creation to be crucified on His creation, by His creation, for the sins of His creation. And then on the third day, Jesus rises again. He rises again on the third day, giving us an eternal fingerprint, the fingerprint of His resurrection, showing us that He really can reverse the sting of sin and death. He really can reverse the curse of sin and death that sin and death has caused our lives. He gives us the eternal fingerprint of His resurrection to show us that He really can give us eternal purposes and eternal joy, even beyond the grave. So you see, the big idea is that our world is full of fingerprints of God's existence, and the historical fingerprints of Jesus' resurrection shows us that Jesus really is the God who created you, the God who can sustain you, the God who can give you a greater moral standard than anybody else, and He's the very God who can satisfy that eternal thirst that is in your soul, giving you eternal purpose and eternal joys, even beyond the grave in Him. My hope for those of you who are skeptics is that you would stick around in this series long enough to be able to hear and explore some of the many other reasons that we have for believing that very thing is true. My hope is that if you're a skeptic, that maybe some of you right now would actually make a decision and make a step towards faith, that you would consider that today. You've taken steps of faith towards skepticism, but maybe today's the day where you feel God stirring your heart, where you've heard some of the things here, and God has been stirring your heart. Maybe this message is affirming some of the things that you've already been feeling. And so my hope is that you would actually consider taking that next step of faith. You've taken steps of faith to skepticism. Well, maybe today's the day where you take a step of faith when it comes to believing in God and believing that God is Jesus. If that's you, then go ahead and click the I commit my life to Jesus button in the chat box. Click the I commit my life to Jesus, and then we will send you a link where, if you'd like to, you can communicate with us, even ask us maybe some more questions that you have, or some follow. If you'd like us to follow up with you, there will be a link where you can have that opportunity. That's my hope for the skeptic. My hope for those of you who are believers is that this message has helped to strengthen your faith, strengthen what you already know to be true. My hope is that this message has caused you to want to pray more, to want to study your Bible more, to be a part of a local church if you're not a part of one. You could be a part of this local church, or even to join a small group, an online community where you can ask some further questions that you have. My hope is that it's caused you to want to draw more near to the very God who has created you, knowing that that God is real, that He exists, that He's all powerful, knowing that He loves you and that He's always there for you. My hope for the believer is that you would desire to share this good news with the world, with the city that's around you. That Jesus, here's the good news, that Jesus Christ, that God is real, that God exists, that he loves you, and that Jesus came to display his great love to us when he died for us on the cross. It's the good news that you're not an accident. You're not an accident. You were not created as an accident by luck. You were created by a loving God out of his loving hands. He loves you. He cares for you. Let's spread that good news with our city by sharing the link to this message with those we know.
Thank you so much for worshiping with us again this Sunday. We're really excited about what God is still continuing to do in the church. My name's Alex. I'm the Growth and Groups pastor. If I haven't gotten a chance to meet you, I just have a couple next steps for you as we close out our time in the service. The first one, there's going to be a link that pops up for giving here. So we obviously never want this to feel like any kind of compulsion. We just want to give people a chance to partner with us in ministry, to continue partnering with us in ministry, and to live out this code of generosity that we try to raise up in our church. The second one Zach mentioned at the beginning of the service was that our groups were going to be vitally important during this series. I don't know about you, there's a lot of information that just came out, and sometimes that brings up more questions. And when we're trying to answer these big questions about our faith, or we're trying to figure out if this faith is even right for us, it's really good to deal with those questions in community, in a place where we can discuss those. And that's what our groups provide. So it's vitally important that we're connecting with each other, talking with each other through these questions, and that's what our missional community groups are going to be for us during this series. We're going to follow up each week in our groups, talking about these questions. What stuck out? What raised more questions? How can we use the answer to these questions? What is that doing with our faith? So we're going to put up another form in there that if you're not already connected to a group, this is a great time to join one. Right? It's still at our homes, we're doing it remotely, but in the convenience of your home, you can tune in, see some people, talk to people, and get to communicate these things. So I would love to see you as part of those. We're going to have a few people in the chat to answer questions. We're also going to send you to a place where it'll give you all the information, and then I can connect you with the group. So we'd love to see you in those groups, and we hope to see you again next week.